Thanks, Graham. Okay, I think what I'll try and cover is basically what we as MTN see the opportunity that the ICT industry can contribute in terms of, green technology, and not just in our industry, but obviously there's a massive opportunity for us to impact, what we do in terms of all the other verticals, all the other industries. And I'll also give you some insight in terms of what MTN has done as a company, in terms of their own strategy and what they've tried to do in terms of green technology. So if we take what the ITU says, and I think this just shows you the opportunity or the impact that ICT organizations or companies can have in terms of the technology, not just directly but indirectly. And you'll see there that every single part of, let's say, any person's existence can be influenced by us as an ICT industry. And that's, so starting off with climate change to health, education, personal security. I was actually at a conference yesterday, My Broadband, and there was a speech by Lars, Rickert, who was the ex-CLC MD, and he used this example of education, distance learning, and the fact that we as an industry can have a massive impact, for example, especially in Africa and some of the other emerging markets where we have the challenge of getting, teachers and skills to remote locations. And I think climate change presents an opportunity for us in a very similar manner, where we can, as a company ourselves, and also indirectly, really contribute significantly to this issue of climate change. And I think it's no longer just a buzzword. I think it's reality. I think a lot of you would have noticed the extreme weather change that we've seen in October, the fact that it's probably the warmest snap in October that we've had, I think, ever, so I think it's reality. And this whole concept of, the fact that we can deliver 7.8 gigatons of carbon dioxide equivalent sort of savings, and that's the annual figure in 2020. And that translates to a real saving in terms of, operational expenditure, 600 billion euros. So it's massive opportunity. And I think besides the corporate responsibility in terms of climate change and green technology, I think there's a real cost benefit to what we can achieve. So it's quite a detailed slide, but the point is that us as an ICT industry, the consumption and the carbon or the CO2 equivalent sort of emissions and what we bring, the growth will be there. The whole point is, though, there's an opportunity to reduce that growth and the impact it has significantly. And directly, this is really the contribution. Obviously, there's a massive growth in terms of data center footprint. And what we're seeing is that, every organization, be it, direct or indirect as an ICT company, so, whether it's a HP or the Oracles or whatever, what they can bring in terms of managing the footprint, both in terms of laptops, desktops, even mobile phones, and, data center footprint. I think there's a lot that can be done to do that. And you'll see here, there's some examples of the technology. So obviously virtualization is one. I think cloud computing in general, but from the fact that you scale in and bring in, resourcing centrally, and that's on demand, it by nature does add to a lot more efficiency and lossless, obviously, consumption of energy. And so many other techniques in terms of purely the way you heat, so the way you take heat out of, a data center, or the way you cool it. And I think, one of the things that, I personally think is a massive opportunity is this whole concept of a mobile workforce, where just by nature of the fact that you can work from wherever you are, you might not need to travel in to a central place to work all the time, So I think just by enabling a mobile workforce, which is, not just, it's a strategy from us growing our business and contribution to the economy, but I think there's also a massive opportunity to save on in terms of, the green impact of all the, traveling people do. So this is really maybe unpacking a bit more, but this is really the enabling effect. So what you'll see is that, what we can save as an industry is probably 5 times the actual direct consumption. that we have as ICT industry, and a lot of it's really about all the technology you can bring. And I think when we talk about opportunity, I think it's a lot bigger than what we think it would be. So the example I've used of a mobile workforce, the fact is now you can do WebEx sessions on tablets. You can, it's not just about sitting in front of a video conferencing terminal. The quality and the bandwidth that we're rolling out now, for example, in South Africa, we've just launched the LT pilot. We're able to do live video streaming at HD quality, and I think then the opportunity to to interact becomes immense, and you don't really have to sit physically, even go into your office to have a video conference with someone sitting in the US or Europe or Asia. You can actually do it from home, and I think that's really a very good example of what we can bring to this, let's call it indirect savings. And then to unpack that a bit more, I mean, the concepts, everything is really about smart technology, but these 4 key areas, so smart buildings, smart grid, which is really a very interesting concept that's quite a big buzzword in the energy sort of industry, smart motors, smart logistics, and I think obviously here there's quite a bit of work that's been done, probably in the first and the last one, even to a large extent the smart motors is coming on stream. But smart grid, we think, is really one of the key enablers of being able to use energy efficiently across these connected grids. So South Africa would be a prime example of where you could take this technology with the challenges we have in terms of the fact that Eskom has to build all these coal-fired power stations. I think there's a massive opportunity again to contribute there. So what's the equivalent saving that you'd be able to extract? So just to put in context, I mean, it's powering 1 million homes in the affluent area for 26 years. So you could literally, have these running without having to generate any power for 26 years. I mean, that, when Zakia put together some of these slides from MTN, and I asked her to give me some real-life examples of what it means when you say you're saving 7.8 gigatons of carbon, equivalent. So emissions, you basically, that's the number, or taking 800 million cars, off the road. So that's massive. I mean, and that's what we can do as an industry. Just to unpack what the technologies will be, so I've talked quite a bit about smart grids or the energy internet, and the interesting thing is when a lot of renewables come in, the challenge with renewables is getting, from where it's generated to where the consumption is, or even to store it, and how do you make that kind of decision, and how do you manage an integrated grid, to reduce the amount of coal that you burn in, to make a decision between whether you should start up another generating unit, or you can rely on wind that's on a wind farm out on the coast somewhere. So those kind of decisions and making those trade-offs in terms of consumption are very important. And then obviously, if one starts looking at building a lot more intelligence in that, so you talk about, for example, Eskom is probably one of the biggest, greenhouse gas sort of emission, contributors in South Africa. So they're probably, in terms of the carbon footprint, one of the largest. They would probably start looking at, can I save, if they start pay, I don't know if they'll pay carbon tax, but can I save on that? Can I save on carbon? Can I generate carbon credits? And bring that in terms of the decisions they're making in terms of, is it coal? Is it renewables? Is it, for example, gas? Whatever it is that they use to generate the power. The other concept of smart building is really about using technology, ICT, to reduce the carbon footprint consumption. So I'll give you an example of what we've done at our head office in 14th Avenue, our innovation center, and it's just one of the examples that we have. But I think what we've also started doing is giving other companies, like for example water quality management systems. We're also looking at other forms like air quality. So areas where it's not just about emissions, but it's about green technology, how we reduce the amount of pollutants that people are basically pumping out into the environment. Smart logistics, again, here it's really about being able to use a lot of the RFID and that kind of technology to manage logistics, to make it more efficient. So you could use an example where people would reduce the amount of, vehicles that are on the road from a logistics perspective just by, using technology to combine loads and so on. And the second one is that, you start being able to control temperature remotely, decide whether you need to switch on air conditioning, all that kind of stuff. So I think again, it's just, I think we're touching the surface in terms of what we can do here. And then smart motors is really about making the motors a lot more integrated, a lot more efficient, and so on, using technology. So as MTN, for us, it's no longer just about sustainability. It's this concept of sustain agility. So for us, it's about making sure that we are agile, we actually understand our contribution directly, indirectly, and we change our green, our strategy in terms of green technology accordingly. So it's no longer good enough just to say we are a sustainable company. It's actually important for us to keep up with all the trends and changes that need to happen and actually improve what we bring to the table. So we're obviously doing quite a bit in terms of energy efficiency. I'll give you a lot more detail. Something we've done very recently is partnerships in terms of electronic waste management. And there's actually representing from GIZ, who's our partner in South Africa, in terms of this space. And I think we're quite excited about the fact that, some of these partnerships that we can really extract value for ourselves, for company and us, and again, contribute in terms of our social contribution. The other key area is indirect sort of work we're doing, and that's really around energy and waste, waste management, water monitoring sort of solutions. So I'll just quickly go through what we've done across the group. So if you take our base stations, which really is where it's not a huge amount of generation in South Africa, but if I take, for example, Nigeria, where I would say 70-80% of the runtime of all our base station sites, and if you take Nigeria, there are probably about 8,000 physically separate sites, across the country. 70-80% of the runtime is actually on generators. So what we're trying to do there is reduce the amount of consumption in terms of the fuel, obviously run on alternative technologies. So in some cases, we've gone full renewable and with generators purely as backup. We also modernize in our equipment, and by doing that, obviously we reduce the consumption. There's a whole lot of intelligent techniques in terms of power management. So if the traffic on a site reduces, we can start switching off the transmitters. So then and that's all done automated in terms of some algorithms over there. And a whole lot of other, and it's very basic things. For example, in South Africa, we've built historically indoor sites, that are in shelters or containers with air conditioners. And what we found is that you don't need to run the air conditioner most of the day. It can actually run on free cooling. So we put in a fan and we extract the hot air, and we only switch on the air conditioning if we exceed a certain temperature. And there's a whole lot of other initiatives we've done. I'll maybe show you some pictures in terms of what we've done on the renewable energy sort of area. In terms of the data centers, we're doing a lot of work in terms of understanding what this, how efficient our data centers are running. So it's really about this whole concept of, PUE, how effective is the power usage, and then also trying to improve, to the extent where you start measuring, what is the efficiency of our different data centers, how do we improve that, and so on. And if you take South Africa, purely from a cost perspective, you're doubling your energy bill every 3 years. The way we're going now with 20-30% sort of annual increases is very important that you understand the cost drivers and obviously what contributes to your energy bill. And then the last thing, as I mentioned now, is really that we've got this electronic waste project that we're working with the GIZ, in terms of recycling and disposing of electronic waste in a very controlled and I think very I've lost my words now, but very controlled and efficient. Thank you, Gary. Very efficient manner, yeah. Okay, and then what we're doing indirectly, so I've used the example of, we basically got all the systems here actually running right now. So water quality monitor, we're doing a bit of smart metering already, fleet monitoring in terms of tracking of fleets, we're doing quite a bit of work on server virtualization. This is really, a lot of this is being done through our sister company, MTN Business. And they've really got quite a bit of cloud computing sort of solutions that they've brought to the market. In terms of the technology we've deployed across our group, so you'll see here, there's a huge amount of work in terms of solar, wind. I think South Africa itself, I was saying to earlier, if you look at the solar and the wind foot maps, has got the greatest opportunity to reuse renewables across Africa. I mean, if you take sub-Saharan Africa, because above South Africa, wind is a bit of a challenge. And also solar, especially on the equatorial sort of region, is not as reliable. So I think there's, in South Africa, there's a massive opportunity. Obviously, historically, because of the cost of energy, electric, normal generation was never probably feasible. But I think nowadays we're finding that it makes a lot of sense to go green on a lot of our remote sites. This is really, when we got this live, it was the first of its kind in Africa, which is a Trigen plant, where we run in our entire test plant, our data center at our head office and our campus office off this 2 megawatt trigeneration plant. The main feed is actually gas, methane gas, and then we have backup, the normal grid power and generators. And what we're also doing is off this gas engine, we harvesting the heat and using that to actually cool the building, using absorption chillers and so on. So it's really a great example of not just using green, but what we've done is we've saved quite a bit on our OPEX, and obviously with the escalation in terms of the electricity bills, we're generating significant saving. And now we're looking at whether we can actually get carbon credits for this. Even though it's a small one, it just makes it gives us a very good view in terms of what we can do from these kind of projects. And in fact, we're building another switch center out in Centurion, and our plan is to almost go totally off-grid there. We'll just have generators as backup and run fully off gas. And then we have quite a few sites that are green. And I mean, the one in the middle here is really an example where there's no, there was no communication in that area before we got there. And we built this totally off-grid. We use the local community to actually help us build the site. It's got a windmill and solar. And what we're doing there is running this totally off-grid. So people are able to actually use mobile phones, whatever that they didn't have the ability to do before. And there's quite a few of these at the moment, roughly 22 sites that we have. And like I said, I think the case for this is getting more and more of a reality. I think the thing with solar, you've got to basically reduce the footprint of the site to make it a lot more feasible. And with the modernization of the base station equipment, that opportunity is there. And then in terms of our building at 14th Avenue, our head office, what we've done, we've actually, it was saying a target, but I think the number I have, Zakia, today is 37%, I think, that we've actually saved. And we've done so much things. So some of the things we've done, for example, we're actually monitoring our energy usage, so we know exactly where that consumption is and try and manage it that way, because I think if you can't measure, then you can't actually improve. I think the second thing we've done is all the external facing windows, we've actually put film on so that it reflects light. We've actually got on our roof as well, we basically put some reflective material. And there's a whole lot of other things, automatic sensors to switch lights on and off. We actually switch off our aircon after hours in certain areas. So we switch off our cooling for, from about 6 o'clock till 6 the next day. So some very simple things that we've done and, reduced our sort of energy consumption by 37%. And some of the awards we've won, and I think, it really, we take a lot of this very seriously in terms of, and we're very proud of some of the achievements we've made. And I think the tri-generation plant we won, we've actually accredited that with the UN FCCC. I think that's the UN Framework Convention for Climate Change. Yeah, I've just memorized this. But it basically is, it's a way of then us being able to access carbon credits, because you need to actually be registered with, one of these organizations, and some other awards that we've won that I think we're really proud of. Okay, thank you. Thanks, man.